In the early 1990s, the Kashmiri Pandit community, the Hindu Brahmins, leave the state in large numbers. Several hundred are killed. What is the background to that? And I ask that because New Delhi constantly uses this as a cudgel against Kashmiri aspirations for independence, that the Hindu pundits were brutally mistreated, they were driven from their homes. This reveals the true face of the Kashmiri movement.
Well, I was young when the mass flight of Kashmiri Pandits took place. By late 1989, there was really no sign of communal tension in Kashmir. There had been some incidents, but also provoked by the state. Indira Gandhi came to Jammu before her assassination in 1984. In 1983, she gave a lot of communal speeches, which led to violence in Jammu and reactionary violence in Kashmir.
Explain more when you say communal speeches. Is this to incite Hindu chauvinism, Hindu nationalism? I mean, give us a flavor of what that means.
Well, communalism is this phenomena, especially peculiar to South Asia, where people from one community along religious lines see themselves as distinct, their interests as distinct from other communities, and it has happened along the three communities, basically the Muslims, the Hindus, and the Sikhs. So all of them have a history of violence against each other, and it's largely based on stereotypes of each other. It's also based on mistaken notions of demographic changes that are taking place. But in 1983, when Indira Gandhi came to Jammu, she was already, this was a time after the emergency in India, when she was really unpopular, but had become the prime minister again, in early 80s. And so she was trying to ratchet up this space at that time. And I don't know if many people know that around that time there was a major changes happening in Ayodhya as well, which would later on lead to the destruction of the Babri Mosque in 1992. But in any case, to return to the question of pundits, by early 1990s, it was actually January 16, 1990, when the local government led by Farooq Abdullah, they resigned from power, and Jagmohan, who was a Hindutva sort of and had a history of communalism, he became the governor of Kashmir.
He was a Hindu nationalist, basically.
He was a Hindu nationalist, and he also later on joined the BJP. And
Bharatiya Janata Party, which is an expression of Hindutva, Hindu nationalism.
Yes, exactly. And so at that time, he said that he wanted to clean up Kashmir from all this that was going on, this mass upsurge for the freedom of Kashmir. And he was true to the word. By that time, there were 270 people killed in Kashmir by militants. Out of them, around 202 or 201 were Muslims, and around 69 or 70 were Kashmiri Pandits. And most of these people were, senior government officials. One was a judge who had, sentenced Maqbul Butt, Kashmiri legendary hero, to gallows. One was a Bharatiya Janata Party leader. Another was a director of the Doordarshan and stuff.
But the TV service in Srinagar.
TV service in Srinagar. So, but many of the Kashmiri Pandits, definitely they were common people as well, a nurse and stuff like that. But it drew, it obviously caused fear among Kashmiri Pandits. And by 20th of January, Jagmohan really facilitated their flight from Kashmir to Jammu, set up camps, provided transportation to them, instead of assuring them that the state will provide them security. And even now, if you look at it, many people, many Kashmiri Pandits who remember those events, they will tell you that it was their neighbors, Kashmiri Muslims, who tried to stop them from leaving. They tried to assure them, okay, they will be safe. And they continued to protect their properties for a number of years after their flight.
2008 seems to be a landmark year in the struggle in Kashmir, uh, there is a mass demonstration at Eidgah right outside of Srinagar. Over 1 million Kashmiris turn out to demonstrate peacefully, nonviolently, using civil disobedience. There was virtually no coverage of this in the media anywhere. But this is fully 3 years before Tahrir Square. So as Khurram Pervez of the Coalition of Civil Society says in an interview in the issue of International Socialist Review, that there was Tahrir before Tahrir in Srinagar, but no one paid attention. Why not?
Well, 2008 definitely was a momentous year again for Kashmir. It was after 20 years, after 18 years, in fact, when massive protests took place in Kashmir. There was not only this Eidgah march, almost a million-man march, but there were other tourist reception center march. There was a UN march, and there was, several other marches. One of the largest was the march to open up the trade across the line of control, because the Hindutva, right-wing parties in Jammu had stopped supplies to Kashmir, which led to massive scarcity of food, massive scarcity of medicine, baby food. And so there was almost like 200,000 people who tried to march to line of control so that an alternative supply route could be opened. And that blockade, economic blockade of Kashmir, continued for around 3.5 weeks. But international media did not pay any attention to that. There was very small reports, in different organizations, but not much.
And in that year, 2008, 2008, 2009, 2010, nonviolent civil disobedience continues. And people were expecting that in 2011 would be another year of resistance. But the summer passed and nothing much happened. Any explanation, and what's your analysis of why seemingly the resistance movement has receded? Or are they just lying low?
Well, instead of receding or lying low, they have truly been crushed. The Indian state learned since 2008. At every small instance of protest, massive forces are called in, to brutally crush any attempt to protest. And there are like hundreds of people in jails right now. Most of them are political organizers, political activists, but also young people, very small kids, like 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, who have been into prison once or twice, so far. There is massive vigilance over, social media like Facebook. People's phones have been tapped. People have been threatened. I was in Kashmir in 2008, 2009. And during that time, people's movement was checked so much that you couldn't really go out. It reminded us of the early 90s when the army was in the process of the occupation.
You mean there were curfews and roads were blocked and the like?
Yes, exactly. Curfews, continuous curfews. After, for instance, 2008 protests, there was almost continuous curfews for a number of weeks. In 2010 as well, you've seen how much violence has taken place, and around 120 people, mostly young kids, have been killed during those protests.
And collective punishment is imposed on Kashmiris. Whole towns and villages are literally shut down and blockaded. I remember driving past one that had been under siege for more than 40 days.
Yes, in fact, since you said it, I remember in 2008, I think it was September, and I was at this one checkpoint by accident, and paramilitary forces really came down heavily upon this group of peasants who were protesting, who were participating in this massive protest. But it was a small demonstration. But the kind of brutality that was inflicted on that day, I couldn't really bear to watch it. But this happens in Kashmir regularly, and over the last 20 years, this collective humiliation, collective punishment has been a norm in Kashmir.